Marcel, where are you going with that disc? You are not putting that on again. Marcel, okay, if you press that button, you are in very, very big trouble.
Attention. Everybody stop what you're doing. It's time for The Unwritten Rule, a Mizzou sports podcast brought to you by the Bleav Network, alongside Peyton Haverman and Kenny Van Doren. Here is your host, Jack Knowlton.
Welcome back to The Unwritten Rule, where we're going to preview Mizzou versus Kentucky. Mizzou football is looking for a bounce-back win. They're going back out on the road after, they've been in St. Louis. They were in the construction site game at Vandy, avoided that trap game, and then now have to see how they can respond after their first loss of the season to LSU, going on the road to face Kentucky. And obviously we got to do a preview of it. And we decided to bring in a guest, of course, have to bring in an expert on the Wildcats. So we're talking to Vinny Hardy, very special guest. Vinny, thank you so much for joining us. He's the host of Bleav in Kentucky. So another part of the network. I know we had one of the Bleav K-State hosts on as well. So Vinny, first and foremost, welcome to The Unwritten Rule. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, appreciate y'all having me, fellas. Appreciate it. Glad to be on another fellow Bleav podcast, and y'all keep doing y'all's thing, man. Thanks for having me.
It's the GOAT network. I think that's one thing we can all agree on. Whether we agree on the outcome of this game on Saturday, I guess will remain to be seen. So let's dive into it. Both of these teams coming off of losses. In fact, Kentucky, a little bit of a tougher game last week, you could argue, going away to number 1 Georgia. And Vinny, I kind of want to ask you about that game first, because I think from us as an outside perspective, and maybe people who didn't watch the game, they look at it like, yeah, it's Georgia, but Kentucky, gave up a lot of points in that game. Was that more of a, was that a performance that maybe worried you for Kentucky a little bit, or is that just Georgia being Georgia, or maybe a bit of both?
I didn't see him getting beat down. Now, look, Georgia hadn't lost a regular season game in 3 years. You got to go back to the SEC championship game against Alabama, their last loss period. So, they're on another level. We get it. We all get it. I mean, you guys gave them a scare in Columbia last year, and, had them on the ropes. So we still kind of felt that Kentucky could go and be competitive, be respectable, go toe-to-toe with them. Kentucky wasn't good last year, and Georgia won 16-6 in Lexington. He held them to 16 points. We had no offense to speak of. So, a couple years before that in Lexington, it was 14-3. 2 years ago in Athens, 30-13. And these are generationally great Georgia teams. So we thought Kentucky was building to a point where we all said it on the podcast, this is legitimately the best chance Kentucky's had in a long time. I'm not saying they were going to win, but Georgia struggled against South Carolina in the first half, barely got Auburn. Kentucky had finally been getting some fast starts, jumped on Florida, jumped on Vanderbilt. We went through that construction site game just a little bit before y'all did. And so if they can go in there and take the crowd out and kind of start fast, Georgia's starting sluggish. But clearly that didn't happen at all. And then you add in bonehead penalties. You add in a 3rd and 16, and you call a play, and you got a guy open, and then you overthrow him, and that's a first down, probably a touchdown, and then it's out of hand, and it's ugly, and first quarter's not even done, and the game is over. I didn't mean to get all long-winded, but that's what we have, man.
We're going to get back to our preview of Mizzou versus Kentucky with Vinny Hardy in just a second, but quick word from our sponsor, Bet Online. Football is back, and Bet Online is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info with all the up-to-minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns. Get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from both the NFL and college football all at your fingertips with Bet Online's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds. From week 1 all the way to the college football playoff and the Super Bowl, Bet Online gives you access to the best football promotions and contests anywhere available online. You'll hear later in the show. We're going to do our Fantastic Four NFL picks. So we'll use the Bet Online spreads for those. They're great. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code Bleav. That's BLEAV, Bleav, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. And now back to our interview with Vinny Hardy previewing Mizzou, Kentucky. Yeah, trust me, we can get long-winded too about penalties.
Even once we just found out what they were this past week. Looking at the end of this game, I mean, for Mizzou fans, the Tigers weren't ranked after their loss. Kentucky stays ranked. They're at 24. Were you a little bit surprised to see them staying in the AP poll after, big loss like this?
I was, and I'm older than all y'all. I'm an old head in here. And to me, Kentucky's, it's had some lean years, been the laughingstock, been the homecoming game, been the automatic win for a lot of years for everybody. So you beat Florida and you get ranked. Well, okay, cool. We've kind of seen this before. I thought after Saturday, there's no way they're going to still be ranked. I say they're kind of one and done as far as the top 25 is concerned. I guess it was, a little more respect for Kentucky than I thought from the voters to kind of say, it was, I guess they kind of thought, it's Georgia, let's keep them in there. And so to see them still kind of hanging in there, I was surprised to see it.
Just getting more into this Kentucky team, it's kind of been a bit of an up and down team. Obviously they had the really incredible performance against Florida where Ray Davis just did whatever he wanted against the Gators defense. But they've also had moments where, they were tied at halftime against Eastern Kentucky. So it's just kind of been a team that's been up and down. And I don't think anyone embodies that more than Devin Leary at quarterback. I know us on the podcast, especially Kenny and I, we thought Devin Leary was going to come in, really take this Kentucky offense to another level, but he's really struggled for a lot of the year. Just completing only 45.9% of his passes against SEC competition. What has been going wrong for him? Is it maybe the offensive line still isn't improved enough? Leary himself is struggling, a combo. What has been the issue with Leary this year?
I think it's a combination. He hasn't been sacked a ton. Last year, Will Levis got beat to death behind that offensive line. Stoops said it today, the throwing and the catching had to get better. He didn't mince words. And when Leary has been accurate, there's been a lot of drops, led the country in drops. And then you've got the inaccuracies. When guys are open, he hasn't been hitting them. He talked the other day with the media. I've just got to make the layups, got to do what I have been doing. He talked with, Jalen Whitlow's a former quarterback that co-hosts the show with us. Other quarterbacks that it's baffling. I just don't know. We know he had surgery. Is he trying to place the ball, trying to guide it? Are the drops in his head? It's just so off. Just where, and he's, super accurate at NC State. I know it's the SEC. He had some good games against Clemson, but it's week in, week out here. And, the non-conference cupcake portion is over. So it's big boys the rest of the way. It's the drops, it has been so out of sync. And I think it's really kind of puzzling to everybody. You hear some say maybe in Cohen's system, the decision-making, the processing is a little bit new to him, or it's making him uncomfortable where he just can't get in the rhythm he used to be. But gotta find a rhythm. Got to. He talked about how you guys are going to play press man and make him hit some shots. And you got to, man, because it's to the point now. It's like, okay, bro, the first part of the season hadn't played in a year, coming off injury. Okay, get into a groove, get the rust off, and now we're halfway through the season, and it's like, and so it's really, it's probably one of the hottest topics of what is really going on, because this guy's super accurate. in the portal. Could have got Graham Mertz. Everybody was like, no, thank goodness we got Leary, and it's just not panning out to this point.
Yeah, I feel like that's such like a underrated thing now with the portal. Like you have all these quarterbacks moving around. It feels like you can take a good gamble on one, but sometimes it just doesn't gel for whatever reason. And so yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Leary can get it together. I do want to turn though to something at least I want your take on this. I think could greatly hurt Mizzou. We saw them give up over 130 yards to two players on LSU in Jaden Daniels, who, has just been spectacular this season. And then Logan Diggs, their running back. This was not a good display of rushing defense for Mizzou last week. And Ray Davis is a good running back. You mentioned what he did against Florida. Is that something, you think Kentucky should maybe target given maybe Leary's play, and what other threats do you think Mizzou might face and things Kentucky could exploit on Saturday?
Ray Davis is probably, topic number one for Missouri. I mean, he scored a touchdown in 6 straight games. You had to go back to like World War II the last time a Kentucky player had done that. Like seriously, it's been decades.
That's tough.
Since something like that has happened. So,
yeah.
And we were all familiar with Ray being at Vanderbilt. As Kentucky fans, he came to Lexington and put it on us last year when Vanderbilt beat us to snap their 26-game SEC losing streak. He ran for about $130. So we're very familiar with what he was able to do. He just magnified that against Florida. He's the one constant right now that you pretty much know what you're going to get. I mean, he was pretty much shut down with Georgia where the game went. You couldn't really run after you've been down so quick. He still had a nice touchdown off a screen pass. So if they try to load up on Ray, Kentucky has a lot of good tight ends. We still haven't really seen them yet. Bates, Isaiah Cummings, Kamari Anderson, a lot of different guys. Utilize the tight end, especially if we got the receivers that continue to have drops. Barry Brown and Dane Key, maybe a little sophomore slump. So I think you're going to get a steady dose of Ray. They're going to try to establish him for sure, and they'd be crazy not to. But we all kind of keep waiting for the tight end depth to maybe be established at some point too.
I mean, Ray Davis he's just been unstoppable. We've been bullish on him since the start of the year. We've been saying, he's an underrated guy. Be on the lookout for him by the Kentucky game app, comes around. And, albeit he is a transfer, but you look at some of these other running backs just in Kentucky's history in the last couple of years, Chris Rodriguez Jr. and Benny Snell, like there's been some really good, performance backs coming out of Kentucky. My next question for that is, we've heard some issues with that offensive line. We've heard some play, some maybe penalties as well. What's really just not working well in the trenches for Kentucky right now?
Well, Kenneth Horsey being hurt is part of that. They're probably playing, Dylan Ray is playing a lot more than they anticipated, I would think. Jagger Burton was initially at center, and that didn't really go like they thought. Some inaccurate snaps, moved him back to guard, and Eli Cox is back at center. And you kind of saw some continuity there, which, the Florida game was the best game that they had played all year. So interior-wise, the guards are probably maybe, if you got to say the weak link or, Achilles heel, it would be there. Still trying to, maybe get their legs under them. Jagger Burton had just the boneheaded penalty against Georgia where he just power drive the dude after he disengaged, and he went off the top rope on him in front of everybody. And it was early in the game and some drive killers. He's kind of doing some stuff that's trying to get himself in the doghouse. And he's a local kid from Lexington. Everybody was happy to see him stay home, and you just hope he kind of, you got to keep it between the whistles and know when to chill out, So, but yeah, getting Horsey back, if he's able to come back, would help. So yeah, those are probably the biggest things as far as the O-line is concerned. the tackles have done pretty good. Jeremy Flax, they brought in some transfers to take his job, and you thought, well, if he loses his job, he's going to leave. He dug in and said, I'm going to compete and battle for my job, and that's not something you see nowadays. Most times, dude loses his job, hey, I'm gone. You kind of go ahead and anticipate that to happen, but so I would say interior wise, Cox has solidified the center spot, but just getting better play out of both guard spots is probably what they want to see.
If I can jump in for a minute. Oh yeah, Kenny, go ahead.
I said I'm glad it's not just Mizzou that's having these problems.
That's exactly what I was
like
say.
In the SEC. You're excited to see some of these big offensive linemen, especially Big Ten, SEC, a lot of these schools. And man, it's just been tough. And this is a better offensive line than last year. It still has its flaws and penalties, and it's interesting to see that these two teams both have some bonehead penalties going into this game on Saturday.
Yeah, I was going to say you triggered us with saying, snap infractions and issues with snap timing, because that has just been killer. And a lack of a tight end room is another kind of similarity. We really love Mizzou's freshman tight end. His name's Brett Norfleet. But other than that, it's been nothing for the better part of a season and a half. So we're learning some similarities for sure between these two teams.
Yeah. And this is where everybody lives. I mean, outside of Georgia and Florida State, outside your elite cream of the crop, everybody's got these same problems. Everybody's trying to fix stuff on the fly. Transfer portal, you can accelerate stuff. If you hit a home run in the portal, if you swing and miss, then you're still kind of screwed. Kentucky's done pretty well since the portal's kind of been a thing. Jacquez Jones from Ole Miss, Kelvin Joseph at corner from LSU and went to the Cowboys, and now with the Dolphins. They brought in Levis from Penn State. I mean, come on. So, now Ray Davis and a lot of different guys where you can argue they've gotten bang for their buck out of the portal. But you got to evaluate, and is it a fit? And Larry, he's got half a season to kind of maybe change the way he started off. So, I mean, you guys know this is where the rest of, if you're not Georgia, everybody else is trying to fix the same problems, and it's just how they approach it, and does it pan out or not is basically what we're all looking to see what happens with all our teams.
Just switching gears, if you had asked me coming into the year, I mean, what the strength of each team going into this matchup would be, I would have obviously said Mizzou's defense against Kentucky's offense, but it's kind of been the inverse for each team. Kentucky's defense, I mean, right now in the SP Plus rankings, they rank as the 17th best defensive unit in the nation. And Mizzou's offense, I mean, has been the story for them. So I'm just curious who on Kentucky's defense has kind of been a standout, maybe someone to watch out for, and how do you think that defense matches up against Mizzou's offense that suddenly has broken out?
Well, they've kind of had guys on each level. I mean, you can't miss zero Deion Walker on the line. He was broke out as a true freshman last year, and he's continued that as a sophomore. Trevor Wallace at inside linebacker is a freak. Bruce Feldman, he was number 11 on his freaks list in the summer. Quietly, Derek Jackson, the other linebacker, is balling out as well. Maxwell Hairston, had a couple pick sixes against Vanderbilt. He was, player of the week. At corner, no doubt he's going to see a lot of Luther Burton, who is, just killing it right now and leading the nation and doing what he's doing and being a solid player for them for a long time. I would say those three guys primarily. Geiger is out at safety, so Ty Bryant, a freshman, is going to be in there, and no doubt Drink is going to try his best to, expose him and confuse him and get him in some compromising situations just for the lack of experience. But I would say Walker, Wallace, and Hairston would probably be the most notable players so far from a production standpoint and from a, people, oh, look what they did, kind of standpoint as far as production and notoriety is concerned.
Yeah, I mean this is definitely, we've taken notice of how good of a defense this Kentucky team's got. You kind of answered it already, because my question is going to be about, what have you guys on your show made of Luther Burden's season so far, and who have you kind of picked to stop him? It sounds like it's going to be Maxwell Hairston that's matched up on him, and it looks like he had 8 tackles against Georgia, so he's definitely a stud. But I guess I'll kind of double down on it. I mean, what have you guys been talking about, even off air, on air, with regards to Mizzou this season, and just your impressions on them, overall?
I think and we'll record as soon as I finish here.
Right.
We're going to record at 9 and could get him more depth. And, you guys are kind enough to hop on too, so appreciate that. We'll carry this conversation over. I think they've exceeded expectations. Drink getting the extension, I was kind of wondering. I'm like, this dude, it's put up or shut up time. I don't know. And so far, no doubt the 5-1 start is maybe calming down a lot of the complaints or criticism, if there was a lot of that out there in Como. No doubt he's probably feeling validated, like, yeah, I knew I could, turn things around. I'm worthy of this new contract that I got. So still a lot of football left, but they've beaten Kansas State. I was like, beating LSU. Oh, okay. So that's some wins in their pocket that I probably didn't see them getting, back when we were talking about it, like SEC media days or, in the summertime. So yeah, they've exceeded expectations, and now, I mean, y'all got a shot at Georgia. We've already had ours. And now it's just the East kind of beating each other up, the Tennessee and the South Carolina game and all that. We've played Florida already. Y'all still got them. And it's just going to see where the dust settles as far as, the rest of these matchups, like it is every single year. Fighting for second until somebody beats Georgia.
I'm glad you brought up the Drinkwitz extension too, because that happened like an hour before kickoff of the Kentucky-Mizzou game last year. Caught everyone off guard. We're just sitting in the press box. Out of nowhere, we get the information that Drinkwitz has 2 more years added onto his contract. And that's kind of where I want to go from there is, Mizzou playing Kentucky. Before Mizzou joined the SEC, they played Kentucky twice back in the 60s. Like, it was nothing. These two teams weren't rivals. They didn't really have a history together. Now, it's, to some Mizzou fans, this game seems more like a rivalry. And I want to get your take on that. There's been some close games in the past. Last year with the roughing the punter, which had a rule change because of it. A couple years ago in 2018, when DeMarcus Acey got a pass interference call. Like, it was just stuff like that where it kind of felt like Mizzou got screwed over. But at the same time, it feels like these games have been pretty close in recent years. Do Kentucky fans kind of think of this as a bigger game, as kind of a smaller rivalry?
I don't think as much as Missouri. And I'm not trying to add salt to the wound, but, the CJ Conrad game there out there in Como where, Lynn Bowden runs the punt back and then we get the, no time on the clock. But so honestly, that's the way Kentucky would lose for years. The way Kentucky stole that game out there, that's, it's probably older than y'all, but that's the Hail Mary game, the LSU beat us, the Bluegrass Miracle with Nick Saban was there. That's how we lose. My dad passed away 2 years ago. He was at that LSU game, the Hail Mary game. He had his foot on the gate. He's ready to storm the field. They complete the Hail Mary. He pulls his foot off the gate and just walks to the car and makes that set. No. That's how we lose historically. Brutal, gut-wrenching losses like that. So, you hear the Missouri guys listen to me today, they hate Kentucky. They want to beat Kentucky. And kind of sounds like that's resonating through the fan base as well. Personally, I still, Tennessee's it for me. I grew up on the Kentucky-Tennessee border and still don't beat them as much as we should. And so that's where I look first. This 3-game streak over Florida. Before that, they lost 31 in a row to them. So those are the ones I think are still bigger than Missouri. Missouri's just been in the league a handful of years. And look, I mean, y'all came in and won the East already. So that's still something that we're trying to do. So I think Kentucky fans look more at the Florida and the Tennessee from we hate them and we want to. The way y'all are looking at us,
Yeah.
But and Kentucky's had, before y'all won, it was a little run where Kentucky won 5 or 6 in a row and had a little streak going against Missouri and South Carolina and things like that. And so I think Kentucky still expects to beat Missouri. Don't look at it from that same hate standpoint as Missouri looks at it. And that just depends on the way the rivalry's going. When you're on the wrong side of it, you definitely hate them and can't wait to beat them, and it just pisses you off even more when you lose. And so I get where the venom is coming from the Mizzou standpoint.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, last season especially, some of those guys that were like seniors at the time, and one of them, Isaiah McGuire, who's now in the NFL, he mentioned, I was like standing there watching that play unfold as a recruit. Like I was on the field, watching it. And that they've kind of saw it as a rivalry before they even stepped into the program as actual players. So it might be something a little bit more to some of those players, especially.
Yeah. I remember DeAndre Square and somebody going back and forth on Twitter, one of the players before the game out there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's been brewing.
We had an account, I think it might have been like the Mizzou Barstool account, made like a thread, earlier of like 3 replays of Kentucky Mizzou moments and stuff like that. So yeah, it definitely brews more on the losing side for sure.
Yeah. It's just what I'm looking for. It's just unavoidable that's if you're on the wrong end of it, that's how you're gonna feel.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like whichever team is the one that lost last is just the one that gets more mad. It's one of those rivalries, which can be almost even more vicious than some of the longer standing ones, depending on it.
And you got to wait a whole year to play
right.
again.
Right.
That's just And look, I grew up, the Tennessee streak. Let's see, Kentucky beat them in '84. I'm old. I was 7, wasn't paying attention. And then they did not beat Tennessee again until I was 34 years old. So and so I stormed the field in 2011 because that's the first time I remember us beating Tennessee, because I was in first grade and I was probably playing with toys and doing whatever and wasn't aware. So
little did you know,
to be a grown man in my mid 30s before we finally ended that streak, that's where it just builds. And then you lose close. I've sat in the press box at Kroger Field for Tennessee games. I've been as a fan, sat through a 4 overtime 52-50 game where we got a field goal blocked and we could have won it. And it's just brutal. And it just stabs you to the heart every time you should have beat them and you lose, especially when they're a lot better team than you, and you come out and it's a rivalry game and you play great and then you come up short. It's just brutal, man. It's brutal.
And even though, since Mizzou's been in the SEC, I think Kentucky's 7-4, so it's a little bit more on Kentucky's side about winning. It feels like Mizzou and Kentucky are both 2 programs that are in that middle ground where they, like you mentioned, they have those games where they just get screwed over. Last year for Mizzou against Auburn, with Mevis missing the short kick and then Nathaniel Pete dropping the ball in the end zone. It just feels like these are 2 schools just stuck in those 2 spots, and they just need something to springboard. One of these schools could have a really good finish in the SEC East this year.
It's like the voice of the Cats, Tom Leach, does a play-by-play, and he's talking about you're trying to climb the hill and hold your ground. You're trying to climb past another program and dig in and hold your spot. And then you try to pull up and hold your spot. That's exactly what it's been. And Kentucky and Missouri are right there, fighting for that same area on the hill. And it's hard out here in the SEC, man. And Kentucky going 7-4, that's just because of this little streak that Kentucky went on to 7 out of 8 or 6 out of 8, however many it was. But before that, y'all had the advantage in the series. And so until Kentucky flipped it for these past few years.
Just call it the Pain Bowl. It's just a battle of pain between these 2 teams. Which one has a less miserable loss every year?
Yeah. And speaking of Auburn, we got screwed down there a few years ago. Y'all mentioned Chris Rodriguez. Kentucky scores and he's landing in the end zone, and they just flat didn't call it. And you can there's photos of it. You can go online and find it. And Kentucky should have been in that game, and then there's 7 points off the board. Auburn goes on to win, but had Jason Campbell from the Auburn pod on with us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had to bring that up. I was like, man, y'all just, not even calling touchdowns down there, man. It's ridiculous.
Somebody probably did disconcerting signals too, but that memo hasn't come down like it has now.
Right.
Calling it every play.
Exactly.
Vinny, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a Kentucky fan at least one basketball question. Obviously, I mean, this offseason, there was a little bit of panic because, I mean, they lost. They had a whole just weird thing with their current roster. Didn't bring in a lot of transfers. Cal in general has just, it feels like his seat is actually warm for maybe the first time since he's been at Kentucky. What is kind of the feel around that program right now? And what's the expectation for Kentucky basketball this year?
It calmed down quite a bit once the roster filled out. You got, call it what you want, fate, luck, Bob Huggins gets in his situation, and you get Trey Mitchell from West Virginia when you were really kind of needing a big man because Ugo Onyenso had gotten hurt in the first game they played in Toronto at the Global Jam. And Bradshaw, also another 7-footer freshman, had some issues with his feet. So both your 7-footers got foot trouble. Big guys and foot trouble is always a red flag.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah. I mean, once again, I'm making old references. Yao Ming, I'm a Houston Rockets fan. Yao Ming with the Rockets. Sam Bowie, who played for Kentucky back when I was 7 or 8 years old, went on to the Trailblazers, gets drafted ahead of Michael Jordan, has foot and leg trouble, and, Portland then does it again with Greg Oden. But I'm just saying big guys sometimes in lower extremities is a bad sign. So you get Trey Mitchell in, the roster fills out, so that calms everybody down because in May or June, there's only 7 people on the roster. He doesn't even have a team. There's only and look, a lot of Kentucky fans aren't happy unless they're worried about something. So that was fuel to the fire. And then once that fire gets put out, they move to being worried about something else. So they go and play well in Toronto, and okay, all right. Then we move on to this Zvonimir Ivicic from Czechoslovakia or Ukraine. He's another 7-footer. His eligibility was, is he going to get in? Is he going to make it? So we were worried about that because our 7-footers are hurt. We need this guy, even though he's shows flashes of good play and there's inconsistencies, and he's not going to come in and start, but he can come in and block shots, hit a 3, and provide 5 fouls at worst. So we worried about him. Now they got the admissions correct and worked out, so he's on campus. They're going to probably announce him. He's supposed to arrive tomorrow. Big Blue Madness is Friday. So I'm saying all that to say that the roster is in place, and as long as everybody stays healthy, they ought to be better than they have been in the past few years. This is a, quote, Cal team with, Wagner, Dillingham, guards that can take you off the dribble, get to the bucket. Kentucky loves to throw the lob to the big. If, the opposing big rotates over, you can lob it right to your big. Got some shooting with Antonio Reeves, who came back. So length and athletic, big men, rim protection. This is what Cal had, with Anthony Davis when they won in 2012, Willie Cauley-Stein when they had the 2014, 2015 team. They went 38-0 and lost to Wisconsin, and a hair from going undefeated and winning it all. This is a team that, Cal's type of squad, if you will. Oscar Tshiebwe was not a rim protector. He was great, rebounded like nobody's business. But this is more of a team that, quote unquote, Cal likes to have. Go back to his UMass days with Marcus Camby, or speed, athleticism, kind of overwhelm you like that. So everybody's cool now, waiting for the games to start, and people are probably a little bit upset that they're just ranked 15th now, that the roster's full. So we got to find something to kind of be irked about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you got to as a blue blood, which I actually want to ask you about. This is my last question. Did you see the thing about, you guys along with, I think it's Kansas, UCLA, and Duke are all ranked in football? All the traditional blue blood basketball schools are all not just basketball schools this year. They're all good at football.
That was pretty cool, and been waiting for that to happen, and it's never happened, and it's cool to have that moment. And I didn't think we would be there based on what happened with Georgia, but the fact that Kentucky was able to hang in there and to have all of them ranked at the same time was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was fun.
Yeah, we got one last question for you here, Vinny, before we let you go. But this was a quote that we found about 2 days ago from Mark Stoops' radio show. I'm going to read it to you real quick. And you already know it, but
yeah.
Fans have the right to complain. I give it to them. I just encourage them to donate more because that's what those dudes are doing. I can promise you, Georgia, they bought some pretty good players. You're allowed to these days. We could use some help.
Yeah, that was the big one of the big comments from his show. To me, I think it was more. I'm kind of in the camp, kind of bad timing to say that after you beat 51-13. There are some that are like, well, how are the guys in the locker room going to feel about that when they don't feel like they're good enough? They know it. He tells them, look, I'm recruiting a guy to come in and take your job. So I don't think it's going to be a problem in the locker room. I think it'd be more of a problem with the big boosters who are like, yo, man, we already kind of chipping in a lot, and you go say this. So it was, you shouldn't have said that after 51-13, in my opinion. But yeah, it caught a lot of buzz, especially when he talked about, especially with Georgia being who they are, and him to say Georgia buys players. Kirby didn't really seem to be sweating it, and he said, I'm not going to bite on it. But yeah, and Stoops kind of came out and clarified it today. I was just trying to get the fans to to just kind of help out, but he kind of patched it up today. He's for all the fans, whether they donate a lot or $1 or a penny or that kind of thing. So, but with it being Georgia, and you just lost to Georgia, and I think that just kind of made it take off.
Yeah,
For
it
sure.
adds up. It adds up. Kirby was too busy telling his players that they actually are not the best team in the country, so you can motivate them to win another natty.
That's right,
somehow.
yeah.
Somehow make them the underdogs like they do every year.
Yeah, they're gonna go 6-6 now.
Right.
Jordan.
Not good enough. Not
That's
good
right.
enough. Yeah, wild stuff. Well, Vinny, thank you so much for joining us. Mizzou, Kentucky this Saturday. Big game. Obviously, the Wildcats still ranked. Missouri, very close. We were sad for the opposite reasons or surprised, what have you, that, we got that, I guess, 26 designation in the top others receiving votes. But, yeah, we're expecting, I think, a very good game. 6:30 start time, primetime game, too. So it'll be a good one out at Kroger Field. And so, yeah, stay tuned for that. We'll recap a post-game show. And for us here at The Unwritten Rule, this is The Unwritten Rule presented by Bet Online. Vinny, thanks again for joining us. Take care, everybody.